All right, everybody. This is Bold Like a Leopard, the American Gladio podcast, and we have a guest, Tariq, who is joining us I think you're from the state of Texas, right? Um,
Yeah, Dallas.
and we're going to be, and there's probably two people not very similar, but I think we have kind of a meeting of the minds on this Farrakhan issue, which is the first thing we're going to address. So, Tariq, do you have any past where you've seen Farrakhan, heard him speak? What's your exact knowledge of his past?
Yeah, I'm not a really big avid follower of Farrakhan, but like I respect him because I'm gonna be honest with you. When I was coming up, well, I grew up in a pretty much predominantly white neighborhood with my dad, and so I had a more affinity with white people than black people. So when it was when I moved with my mother, I lived around black people, and she wasn't as rich as my dad, so we was kind of living in the hood, what they would call hood. And I was being done all types of ways, and I was getting really frustrated, and I almost had a hatred for my own people. I really did, until I started listening to Farrakhan. I think my manager at one of my old jobs, well, he said, "Why don't you listen to Farrakhan?" And he as to why people are the way they are, and the causes of it, and what we need to do to change. So more and more, and I really like what he says about politics, foreign policy. It just seems to be outside of the mainstream media. He's not as radical as I thought he was, but yeah, that's pretty much how I became close to Farrakhan.
And I personally, I've gotten, probably the best example of any personal contact with, I haven't met him, but my dad, and by the way, we're Jewish. He still works at a place, and there was a guy who worked there who was a huge Farrakhan supporter, and he just used to look at my dad funny. He used to. I mean, it was obvious that they did not get
Yeah.
along, and I actually met him at his job, and my dad introduces me to him, and the guy's like looking at me like I'm some sort of lizard or something. So it was pretty funny, but I've never seen it. So I've heard Farrakhan speak, and I have to say, he does say what he means. I think he's not one of these people who self-censors a lot, and even though I don't feel any real common ground with him on many issues. I don't believe
Yeah.
in many of his
Yeah.
beliefs on science and religion. But he is what he is. I think people should accept it. And this new controversy. How about you posted something about it, and then I took a look at it. Can you explain what's going on with this women's march
Yeah. Yeah.
woman? Can you still hear us?
No, sorry. Hello.
Yeah, I hope you're not losing reception, but I think we did lose it for a second.
Good. I'm good. Okay. Yeah. I'm listening now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think you asked me about that controversy. I read parts of the article, but I didn't read the whole thing. But yeah, I put it up there because it was I think two other people shared it on my Facebook page. I thought it was an interesting read because the black woman who was on there getting attacked, she also hangs around the feminist movement. And, she's very active in the feminist movement. The LGBT, and to see, I know our worlds is a little bit different due to backgrounds, which is absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. But the issue that black people have with things like that is that we try to, because we have so many problems in the community, we kind of want people to focus on fixing the black community before we start reaching out and fixing the LGBT community, feminist issues, things of that nature. So she attended a Farrakhan. I guess Farrakhan had a get together or something like that, and she attended it, and she's getting attacked for that. And I don't believe that she's really getting attacked by black outlets. And the point I was trying to make is that as black people, we shouldn't allow white liberals to dictate who we can and who we cannot meet. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you with Farrakhan because I understand. For example, like I will understand. I understand why Jews will have an issue with Farrakhan because I hear the stuff that he says about Jews. And yeah, if I was a Jew, I would definitely have an issue with that also. So I completely understand. I think from his point of view, I don't believe he talks about all Jews. With Farrakhan, for example, like if there's an Asian controlling some type of newspaper or something, and they're portraying black people in a certain way, he'll call out that Asian for what he is. So if there's a Jew doing something, it's not like he's saying all Jews are like that. I believe he's saying, this certain Jew is behaving this certain way. But I'm pretty sure he made it really clear. Well, as far as I've heard from some of his speeches, I don't think, excuse me, I'm sorry, I got a little cough. He's ever slandered the entire Jewish religion or all Jews. I think he goes after the elite, in the same way, he also goes after the Muslims in the Middle East, the really radical, extreme Arab ones. I mean, I've heard them really talk down on them, talk about how they're not following the Quran. So he does that. But like I said, if I was a Jew, I would understand how that would offend me. But if you dig deeper, I don't think, me personally, that he has any issues with all Jews. I think his main thing is really putting black issues first, But yeah, that's just my whole thing with that, though.
Okay, so from my perspective, I hope you can still hear me. I know you might lose reception because you're driving, but
Yeah, I can't.
the thing is, I think that he did, for example, say that Judaism is a gutter religion. But the problem here is, again, it's not with Farrakhan, because Farrakhan can believe and preach whatever he wants in the United States of America. First Amendment, I accept it. I don't have to like everything he says. The issue with Tamika Mallory, who is the woman from the march, is
Yeah,
that Farrakhan is the opposite of a feminist. He had this speech in 1994 for women only, where he said happiness in the home. He urged women to embrace his formula for a successful family. He encouraged them to put husbands and children ahead of their careers, shun
yeah,
tight short skirts, stay off welfare, and reject abortion. But that's his religious belief.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the thing is, I don't think, again, I don't think we have to beat it. We've both acknowledged I'm not a fan of Farrakhan, but
yeah.
I believe in his freedom. The issue here is this lady who is marching all the time for abortion rights and for women's equality, and she's based. I mean, I think it's her issue. I think it's the issue of people like Keith Ellison that won't come out in the open and say, hey, you know, I think I think Louis Farrakhan might be a good guy. That's personally the way I look at it.
Well, they can't. And yeah, you're right. She is like it is a contradiction. I totally agree, because what she stands for, Farrakhan doesn't stand for any of that. But I don't know if you have Jewish leaders that you can listen to. There's something like, if you're black, just like in every race, you can kind of understand that too and feel proud about it. Like, I kind of get where she's coming from, because Farrakhan does say some things to black people that is very uplifting. Like I said, just like any race. So I can see why she would listen to him, even though what he says is completely contradictory to what she says. I've talked to some feminists before. I don't know if you ever have. I've talked to some radical feminists. I've never talked to white feminists, but you know what I'm saying. On the black end, I've talked to some who really have an issue with men. But if you kind of just keep leveling with them and breaking things down, they start to understand. So yeah, I get it. It is, it's contradictory and it doesn't make any sense. But I think she's at a cross. I think she's at a divide, which a lot of homosexual blacks, feminist blacks have. It's like, what do they put first? You know what I'm saying? Their sexuality, their gender, or their race. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like they gotta juggle all those things. I think they should put race first above all, but you know, I guess she goes to Farrakhan to hear, things that she needs to hear about black people. You know what I'm saying? And it may not be to her liking, but it feeds that part of her mind. And then she'll go on a woman's march and say, and do all that nonsense to get the, you know what I'm saying? But I honestly think that's what it's about. But to the outside world, they probably wouldn't understand it. But I get where she's coming from, but it still is what you're saying, contradictory. Because yeah, Farrakhan is about the family. You know what I'm saying? He's not about this man and woman separating, combating, competing against each other. That stuff is actually horrible for the black community. I don't even know why a lot of black Democrats subscribe to that. And yeah, you're right. Keith Ellison not saying anything. It. I'm telling you, man, with the black community, that's like a hard conversation. What is more important, womanhood, your sexuality, or race? Those are like, seriously, man. It's like hard to choose which one is more important. That's why she's in the she is in the situation, man. Like,
Yeah,
we
I
don't
think it's
have.
a bit. I see it a lot because we talk a bit more on Facebook,
Yeah,
so I see a lot on your threads and everything. And yesterday you posted an amazing rant by a lady concerning Black Panther, and I thought it was it was pretty funny because it's unfortunate. I think that people, and this happens in every community, by the way, but I think it, let's
exactly.
agree that in the Black community, with the regards to that movie, it's a bit too much. That
It is.
people are taking it to some sort of level where suddenly it's like they're going to the movie in these costumes that are more for coming to America, which I think is one of the best movies ever. But the issue I think you're talking about is coherence, and a lot of the very big Black activism people are having this frustration when it gets mixed up with intersectional feminism and the gay movement
Yeah,
and all that. I personally, my position is, being a Jew, I look at some of the
yeah,
progressive Jewish movements and I say, no, I'm not going to participate in. I have my beliefs. I believe, for example, in the Second Amendment. I believe in full non-censorship of all beliefs against the ADL, for example. So I don't agree with them on anything, or where we do agree, I choose to support it as an individual, but not on their side. Do you find yourself, you know, that not just with Farrakhan, but do people try to get you to commit to groups within the Black community that you don't really have any desire to join?
yeah, man. And it's the one I get the most is the bash all white people group. Because I'm just, what I'm saying, you have to be like a logical thinker, man. Like, you can't be everything based on emotion, man. And that's the problem I have. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because there are some white people I listen to, politically especially, who are very intelligent. You know what I'm saying? On propaganda, and I'm like, oh, maybe the black community can use this type of person. You know what I'm saying? To just learn about politics or even gender issues. White people have Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know him. I listen to that guy a lot. I mean, I learned so much from him.
Yeah, everybody
But
knows
I don't
Jordan Peterson by now. Yeah.
know exactly. But if you would go to like the black folks that you see on TV, they'll just call him a white supremacist. Like they no one would address his points. He'll just be called a white supremacist. And some of that stuff that he's saying, maybe black men and women could listen to learn about. But what you said about Black Panther is true. It's ridiculous, and you can say whatever. Cause I don't really care. I don't really get emotional. But the issue I have with Black Panther is just how black people are acting like this is the second coming of Jesus. I think that's very embarrassing. It's just like, I, I mean, it's just like you look at a bunch of black people and you stop there, and you don't look who's over it and who's making money off of it. It just seems like anyone can just come and pimp you. Now, that's not. I wasn't saying boycott the movie. I've never told anyone to boycott the movie. They were twisted. But I'm just saying, it's just this whole just um the blackest movie ever. What does Black Panther mean to me? It's just all this cultural stuff over a movie that wasn't even created by black people, and it's just kind of, I don't know, man. It just doesn't rub me the right way, and it's making all these billions of millions of dollars. And it's just like when it comes time to pull money together to like probably clean up neighborhoods or for schools, it's just like pulling teeth. So that type of stuff that angers me, man. It really does. That just the dancing always just to bringing drums to the movie theaters over a fictional superhero movie, man. This is not even a this is not even reality. This is like a Marvel comic movie that's transitioning to the Avengers, the Infinity Wars. You know what I'm saying? Now I watch Marvel comics, so I just watch it for the movie. But when I'm looking at black people online, like saying things on Twitter, like white people don't come, you know what I'm saying? Or like armor white folks is about to make a move. I'm like, how are they good? They're making money. Like, why would they try to shut down a movie that they made? Like, it making any sense? But then there's the politics behind it. I guess the white people they are talking about is the alt right white people. I'm like, this is just too much TV. Like, I don't remember one time when the alt right has just went on a massive killing spree against black people. You know what I'm saying? But it's just this whole paranoia, hysteria. Just this is just the blackest thing. You can't make a bad review about it unless you are some type of racist. It's just all that, man. It just angers me, man. It's just so much social justice.
Yeah, I'll
I
tell
just
you what.
watch the movie and just watch the movie and leave all that other stuff out of it, man.
Yeah, there was that's exactly, I think people have a right to make the movie. People have a right to go watch it or whatever. When they did the Rotten Tomatoes censoring of the reviews, I thought that was the most, because if the movie's really great, you don't need to censor anybody. If the movie and I'm probably gonna go see the movie this Thursday, so I just want to go in there and be able to appreciate it on its own merit, as opposed to having it become basically the next Emancipation Proclamation or whatever. This it's ridiculous. I'll tell you the closest thing I can compare it to, and you might laugh at this. When I was probably 16 years old, Passion of the Christ came out, and suddenly all of these Jewish groups were protesting it because they said, "Oh, this movie is awful. It's anti Semitic or whatever." Mel Gibson is hates us or whatever. I said, Mel Gibson is a hardcore Catholic. This is his vision of Scripture. He tries to remain loyal to it. It's his right to make the movie. I watched the movie. There are some parts of it that are pretty graphic and gruesome, but that's really the way that he views I guess what is it, the gospel?
Yeah, the gospel. Yeah.
So I said, people should just calm down and let it go. Instead, it became this major political issue for the time, and to be honest with you, it just made me a bigger fan of Gibson's other movies. Passion of the Christ was like, I don't even know what I'm looking for here, but it's kind of stupid that people, it's movies, dude. It's movies. Just let it be. I don't know why people can't do that. What else was I gonna talk about with you?
No, you're absolutely right about that. Now, I haven't seen it, man, but I remember. I think I was so young when that happened, but I haven't seen it. But I don't know. I guess he alluded to the Jews killing Jesus or something like that. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. I don't know how big that was. Maybe some people took offense to that, but I don't think it was as bad as just the hype around Black Panther. Because, like I said, if you even make a bad review about that movie, it's just like it's heavily scrutinized. And what I fear is that this is creating a narrative with Black people, which I don't like. Is that we're too emotional. Like you can't be real. And the thing is, the way my dad raised me, you know what I'm saying? If I do wrong or if I'm failing somewhere in life, he tells me where I'm failing. It's no like sugarcoating it, hugging me or making excuses like, no, Tori, you need to get this right. This is what you need to do. Like I didn't, it don't matter how hard it was. It was like out of love. You know what I'm saying? But there's got to be some tough love, man. And it's just like, this Black Panther movie. you can't write a bad review. Just everything just had to be so powerful. And there was some things in the movie that I had an issue with. You know what I'm saying? Like this whole social justice pandering. Like you haven't seen it yet, but white people are not. If you watch the movie, white people are not made in a good light. And it just feels like, does every black movie have to be like this, where we just have to just be like this? Every white person's an enemy. Like I just like, God, dog. Like, can we just have a normal movie? Does it always have to be politically charged? Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's stuff like this that drives black people to be very emotional. And I don't know if Hollywood is making money off it, first off. And then when you look at the political parties, the Democrats kind of rear black people into them by calling everyone a racist who doesn't support them. So this is just, all of this is also political to kind of just keep black people to the left instead of in the center, or you know what I'm saying, or just maybe they are on the left, but they can understand the right, or on the right and understand the left. It's just stuff like this in the long run. It just creates a divide, man, and it's just, I don't like it. But yeah, there's a big debate in the black community. I don't know if you saw my Facebook page about this Black Panther movie, man. It really is, because folks is really defending this movie like it's this. Like it's
Well,
this thing.
look, I'll tell you one conversation. I did see one of your threads because it's really been a lot of people I see, especially in the black community. The friends I do interact with on Facebook, they have threads like this. But there was one lady who was same perspective as you, but she also said it's one of the first instances where you see like a positive portrayal of a black hero. And I said, if you really think about it, though, if you really think about it, the great movies that involve black protagonists would be X with Malcolm X, fantastic movie. I thought it was great. Ray with Jamie Foxx, and it gave me like a deeper appreciation for the music. It was true to the music. It was true to the man's life. And I think another example was 42. Also, was that Chadwick Boseman?
I
Was
think it was. Yeah, yeah. No, I think it was.
So some of these real life portrayals of black figures from the past, what about Ali with Will Smith? A lot of
I
these
haven't seen
movies.
that. I
Sorry.
haven't seen. I haven't seen that movie. Yeah, I think that was okay, but yeah, but I get what you're saying though.
Yeah, the real life figures in the black community, they do have good movies made about them.
Yeah,
And there was another one that wasn't about him. It wasn't about Sugar Ray Leonard, but Hands of Stone. I do like watching boxing movies, and sometimes boxing matches themselves. Hands of Stone included a very good portrayal of Sugar Ray Leonard by Usher. So first of all, people are ignoring the positive in the movies, and second of all, it's still only a movie. So
yeah,
ultimately, like you're saying, the actual change doesn't have to be done on the screen. It has to be done, but for the audience. If the audience isn't actually affected by these movies, like you said, Black Panther is produced by a major media conglomerate. Most of the profits don't go to the audience; they go to shareholders. It's a
yeah.
no brainer, and it's ridiculous how people are attributing such importance to it. And I think this is generally the problem here, and it's
Yeah, it is. It's a big problem.
what's your opinion?
Simple,
Before
man.
before you go of the Oscars on Sunday.
Oh man, you know what, man? I didn't watch the Oscars because I really didn't feel like hearing about Me Too movement, Donald Trump bashing, the race stuff. Like I'm sick of that, man. I don't like being lectured to, man. I just didn't feel like listening to that. So I didn't watch any of it. I'm just watching other people's YouTube video accounts of it, and this is exactly what I thought it was. Highly politically charged. If you're gonna have Jimmy Kimmel, you know what I'm saying? It's just like I guess Hollywood is really trying to get rid of all of its Republican supporters. And I don't even consider myself a Republican, but you would be naive to say there's no type of movement that's really just trying to marginalize them. You know what I'm saying? Just to paint them as just the most evil people, and everyone else is good. And if you defeat the Republicans and Donald Trump, the country is going to go better. And I don't understand how people can't see that. But yeah, I don't want to hear about the Me Too movement and all that, man. All this man bashing. Like I'm really sick of that. You know, the first black person to win an award. You know, I don't care about that stuff because it's symbolism. Like I don't care about a first black person winning an award. I don't care about that because my thing is if the black man is unable to create his own and has to rely on someone else to award him or pat him on the back. I see that as weakness. I don't see that as strength. I don't care. I'm not gonna bash him. You know, I'm not gonna bash him and talk down, but I just don't jump for joy and start crying on stage because I'm just like, you know, you're waiting on someone else to award you. You know, why can't you do for your own? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of black people don't even go to their own darn award shows. Like if BET or the Image Awards have their own awards, they would skip it. You know, Beyonce don't even go to the BET Awards, but she would go to the Grammys. So there's something psychological about that where they don't accept from their own. They want others to award them. So I don't care about that stuff, man. And you know how liberals keep saying, yeah, the first black person. That's all just emotional symbolic things just to keep us on that end. So yeah, I didn't watch it, and just to really quickly on the Black Panther, you know, like I said, the whole first black hero, which is good, but once again, that's just symbolism to me because it's just like black people had all the opportunities to create their first black hero. Why didn't they do it? Why do you have to wait for someone else to give you the opportunity and then jump for joy? You know, Tyler Perry, you know, we only want to create romantic comedy movies, and sometimes we do a good job with, you know, black historical figures. But like we had the resources to create a black superhero, but they never did it. So, like I
Well,
said,
well, there was Blank Man with and Meteor Man by
yeah,
Robert
I remember that.
Townsend.
I remember that. I remember
By the way, you know, if you watch those movies, they're classic '90s comedy. You know, but I know what you mean.
yeah, just like you could create a cultural black hero, but you don't do it. So it's just like, why does a white person, and this is not against white people, but they have to come up with the idea. You know what I'm saying? Disney has to sit there, okay, let's create the Black Panther movie. We will make it all black. That was not created from a black mind. And like I said, there is nothing wrong with watching it, but it just feels like other people have to give you the opportunity to show greatness on screen. Like it's like if you can't do it for yourself, other people have to give you opportunity. Then you really have no control over your damn community. You know what I'm saying? Like you are just relying on other people. You know, it was the same thing with Obama. Obama becomes the president. Did the black community do any research on who funds him? Any research on his policies? Did they pressure him on anything that he'll do for the black community? Absolutely not. It was all first black president. He looks good. He has a beautiful wife. He has two beautiful daughters. And that's it. It's just the whole symbolism of a black family walking into the White House. And that's it, man. It's just like nothing else. There is no more research. We just go to sleep. We let Obama do whatever the hell he want to do. You know, he can run all the wars. He can fight for illegal immigrants. He can fight for homosexuals. He can fight for women and just completely ignore the black community, and we don't care. Like it's just that type of mentality I'm trying to break. But you know, I feel like that is a major weakness for black people. You know what I'm saying? It's just this whole
Yeah,
first black, first. I'm sick of that, man. Like I don't care.
I think unfortunately, you know, there's a real problem because the black community does need, I think, leadership, especially on the local level. I live in Cleveland. We have
Yeah,
our black mayor is kind of, his grandson's always in trouble with the law or whatever. But,
yeah,
you know, the problem I think with Obama, and, you know, we could probably talk about this for a long time. So, and I know you're on your phone, but with President Obama, you know, when he came into power, I didn't vote in that election. I thought both candidates were crap.
yeah. They work.
And I thought in 2012, I didn't want to vote for Mitt Romney. I thought he was garbage, but I did, and I regret it. But Mr. Obama was a fantastic presenter of himself.
Yeah, he was.
A
Yeah, he
great,
was.
yeah, he, great personality. Probably a person you could hang out with, get along with. But he was the first black president but he wasn't the president of Black America. And in a certain sense, he was the president for corporate America.
Yes, yes, he was.
And for the special interests, I don't know, who would you say, like unions, Wall Street, things like that. It's unfortunate.
Wall Street, just the same people who fund all the other presidents, Bush, all the, Mitt Romney and John McCain probably would have been doing the same thing, man. He was just no. I think with Obama, it was easier for him to railroad a lot of corrupt policies in and continue these wars because he's Black and he looks good and he's a very good speaker. Because you're right. Sometimes when he speaks, even though I dislike him, I like his message. You know what I'm saying? But then after I get over the emotional high, I'm like, yeah, man, this guy's full of crap, man. It's the same. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'll say what
said it was Russia.
Yeah, the Russia thing, by the way, we'll get into later. But I think if you're talking about President Obama and how the Oscars is trying to box in the Republicans, I think I get what you're saying too. I don't want to be a part of a party. I'm kind of I believe a little more in libertarian economics, civil liberties, but when they demonize the Republicans all the time, it's like they're pushing you back in. It's like like you don't want to eat the nachos, but they're there, and they keep telling you that they're bad. So unfortunately, I might actually vote this year again, which I hate doing, and even in the primaries, which I also hate doing. Look, hopefully you can come back again. I know that we kind of had you on for 30 minutes. If you want, maybe we could set up a different time. I'm going to talk about a couple other topics with Russia and what's that?
Yeah, Friday is great for me because I don't have I'm off all day Friday, so I'm kind of free.
Yeah, we could do probably Friday in the afternoon at the moment, but yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, man, and good conversation, man. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of a libertarian. I'm not really a Republican or Democrat, but it's like you gotta sympathize with the Republicans just because how the media is behaving. So it's just like, well, I don't want to side with y'all, but yeah, exactly what you are saying. You know what I'm saying? Because honestly, if Trump didn't run, I don't think I would have voted for anybody. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't like all of them were the exact same to me. In fact, the Republican debates was very boring without Donald Trump, and the Democrat debates I couldn't even watch it because I didn't like any of them. So I was just that would have been the first election I may have just sat out had Trump not ran. But yeah, we can definitely get into that in a much more in depth. You know what I'm saying? But it's good that you're having this show and these conversations, man, because this stuff is needed, man, especially topics on race, because literally race is being played in a very political, manipulative way. It's not played in a way where they're trying to help people. It's actually played in a way to use people for votes or to give legitimacy to movement. Like, I tell the Black feminists all the time, when you throw your weight behind that movement, because you've been through, you got the whole slavery baggage, you're actually giving that legitimacy and you're not getting anything in return. But yeah, we can definitely go deeper into that, man.
Yeah, I think for example, yeah, exactly. I think there's issues that I wouldn't agree with you on, but there's also issues you don't agree with the people around you about. There's issues I don't agree with people around me about. And actually, before you leave there, Lisa in the chat, she asked, I think the guest would like Sam B. Fuller, a Black entrepreneur who founded a successful cosmetics business and suggested buying bus lines during the civil rights era. He didn't agree with the direction of the civil rights movement. Do you know anything about that, or is that kind of news? Like one of these do-it-yourself people from the 60s, Booker T. Washington style, I think she's talking about.
Well, I don't know the exact person to talk about, but no, I do agree with that. There are actually a lot of Black people who don't like that. Like I said, there's a big fight. I don't know if you read some of my Facebook statuses, but there's a Black entrepreneur. His name is Dr. Boyce Watkins, and he's really on that. you know, we have the money to do for ourselves. We got to stop begging. And then you got black people like Yvette Carnell, who has a huge following, telling people not to listen to him, and black people don't got
I
the
know I know both of those. Yeah, I know
yeah, like we can't
both of
do
those
anything.
podcasts.
We just
Yeah.
gonna fail, and you know, we ain't got no money, and it's just God, it's just like negativity, just it's just sorrow and emotion, and we can't do anything, and we're just gonna fail. Like, oh God, man, it's sickening.
Yeah,
It's just,
I think Boyce Watkins is a proactive guy. You know, he's trying to get people to do something,
yeah,
and Yvette Carnell is a reactive person. I've actually
yeah,
made a reaction video, and because I tagged her, some of her followers commented, and I had like 5 subscribers at the time, and they're like,
yeah,
Yvette's show isn't for you. You're not supposed to. It's for us. And I'm like, well, she's on the full internet. If some asshole like me, some white dude or Jewish dude, whatever, I can find points that are against her, and you don't agree with it, you don't have to watch my stupid show. She has 13,000 followers. What do you care? And she was like, nah, it's our show. Don't watch it. I'm like, it's an open link. It's an open link. I can just. Oh, and I called her a show one time too. I
yeah.
didn't tell you about that one. What's that?
Oh wow, you gotta tell about that, because yeah, I'm interested to hear that, because you see, it's just that type of emotional response. Like, who cares if a white person or a Jewish person, whoever comments on it, like, what gets you so angry to say, oh, it's just for us? Like, you know, that's the type of stuff I'm trying to tackle. Like, who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like, let them talk. I mean, if you have a problem, like, then rebut it. Like, don't say you can't respond because you're this race. Rebut it. You know what I'm saying? And maybe if you come up with a good rebuttal, you can probably educate somebody. But you can't say because you're this race you can't respond. Like, that's just nonsense. But yeah, man, Yvette, she was good on politics with Donald Trump, but it's just, God, I don't know what happened. It's just, she just sounds like really bitter. Like, she blocked me on Facebook because, you know, I was kind of like, you know, she made a status very mad at I think so was P. Diddy for offering to buy a football team. I forget the name of the football team. And
The Panthers, yeah, the Carolina Panthers. Yeah.
yeah, now I wasn't really following that story, but the way how he was just like, he ain't got no money, he ain't gonna do this. Black people ain't got no money, ain't gonna happen. And you know, saying black people need to stop this do for self stuff. Like, it's just like, why? I don't understand why that angers her so much. Like, she gets really angry. You know what I'm saying? So I responded. You know, I say, you know, well, we can collectively pull our money together. We don't really have to rely on other people to give us donations and loans. And you know what I'm saying? She said it's that type of capitalistic mentality that is destroying the black community, and I think she blocked me because of that. But
Yeah,
I don't get it.
she can't really adapt to the way the world is because
Yeah,
she is very, 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 and I used to like her show, but the bitterness was like, it was just the same thing every time. And I
yeah,
don't, I don't get offended by almost anything. It's really the bitterness that drove me. I was like, this is kind of just depressing. And Boyce Watkins, his show, I wasn't always really into it because some of the advice was kind of went over my head. Maybe I wasn't really thinking about finance at the time,
yeah,
but I think he does offer some solutions. But that's about maybe we'll talk a little more on going towards Thursday night. We'll set up something on Friday.
Okay, well, I'll message you, man. Take care, man. I gotta head in, man.
All right. Thanks for stopping by.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that was Tariq once again from Texas, and I wasn't planning to make that kind of one of my full-on interviews, so we'll make a little more of an interview on Friday. I just wanted to get his perspective on an issue that pertains to the Nation of Islam, because he does have a bit of, or Louis Farrakhan more specifically, and that's because he does have a bit of knowledge of that community from a closer perspective than me, obviously, because I probably couldn't get in the door. But it's really interesting, that people are focusing on the Farrakhan angle. Louis Farrakhan in this case didn't do anything wrong. He's had views that have been intolerant for many years. and people know it, and it is, you know, people have to just accept that this man, who's, I think he's in his 80s now, you know, he has his beliefs, and we're not going to change him. Um, what's the difference? And this is where I'm going to segue into the next topics. Is that, you know, people can't, you know, they can't talk out of both sides of their mouths. There's the deputy head of the DNC who's for years denied his links to Louis Farrakhan, and that's Keith Ellison, the congressman from Minnesota. And you know, it's not an issue of being politically correct. The issue is whether you can be honest with your political views towards the public. Okay, and Ellison has denied his links to Farrakhan. Well, guess what? Farrakhan has revealed that Ellison has met him since then. Now, this Tamika Mallory, this is from the Daily Caller. I'll show it very briefly because we kind of did talk about it a little bit much with Tariq, and I do want to move on to some of the other topics. But she is a member of the Women's March, and she's gone here, and they're really criticizing again people for talking about with Farrakhan because of the Jewish angle, because Farrakhan is quite open about not liking the Jews, being you know, I think he called them the enemy around here. So I'm sorry, but you know, you have here Chloe Valderi, who is she is I think she's a pro-Israel Black American activist, and you know, I like her material and everything, but you know, the real issue I think has nothing to do with whether it's Jews. The issue here, because you know, the Women's March is headed by Linda Sarsour, who is also well known for her anti-Jew beliefs, and you know, she denies it all the time, but she said things about you know, the Jew media portraying her as something that she isn't, or something. Well, I'm sorry, but you know, perception does not equal reality, and her perception of reality might be very distorted unless she's you know, and here's the other part, she could just be lying. Now you have Tamika Mallory. What's the real issue with Tamika Mallory going to Louis Farrakhan and taking inspiration from him? It's not with his anti-Jewish stuff, because the Women's March is full of anti-Jewish figures, and that's fine. I guess it's fine because, you know, they can be consistent. They have Linda Sarsour. Why not this other lady? The issue is that Louis Farrakhan is notorious for not liking, you know, not liking women working instead of staying at home. He's very traditional in his outlook on the family, which is that, you know, he's been consistent about his beliefs. If she's a part of the Women's March, she has to be consistent in her beliefs. That you can't go on the one hand and talk about you know, empowering women out in public and standing up against Mike Pence, who they call some sort of medieval inquisitor. Basically, they treat him like he's some sort. You know, he does have some beliefs that are pretty you know, strict in the sense of his Catholicism, but I'm sorry, when you hang out with Louis Farrakhan, that's that's a lot more of an extreme. So let me see here. What are the other stories that are going on today? Well, you have, let me see here. Carlos was just in the chat, and he said there's a bank bill being discussed in the Senate. So out of courtesy to him, I do want to see what he's talking about. 2155. Okay. My mouse is malfunctioning. It's hard to navigate when you don't have a mouse. Hold on a second. So what I see so far, while my mouse malfunctions, is that Instead of taking on gun control, Democrats are teaming up with Republicans. Is it working now? Here we go. This from The Intercept. So Carlos is going to be glad I finally used it. I don't really like using The Intercept if I don't have to, because, you know, I do believe that they do have a bias, but they're not an awful source. Okay, I'll be fair to them. They do reveal, they're very good at investigative journalism and cross-referencing. So let's talk a little about this. It says the revenge of the stadium banks. Instead of taking on gun control, Democrats are teaming up with Republicans for a stealth attack on Wall Street reform. Citigroup executives held a conference call with reporters about the bank's fourth quarter 2017 earnings. The discussion turned to an obscure congressional bill, S-2155, pitched by its bipartisan supporters mainly as a vehicle to deliver regulatory relief to community banks, and 10 years after the financial crisis, to make needed technical fixes to the landmark Wall Street reform law, Dodd-Frank. But Citi's chief financial officer, John Gerspach, told the trade reporters he thought that some bigger banks, like, say, Citigroup, should get taken care of in the bill as well. He wanted Congress to loosen rules around how the bank could go about lending and investing. The specific mechanism to do that was to fiddle with what's known as the supplementary leverage ratio, a key capital requirement for the nation's largest banks. Let me see. Carlos keeps dipping in and out. I don't know why I keep losing people, but what am I going to do? The show must go on, guys. S-2155 did at the time weaken the leverage ratio, but only for so-called custodial banks, which do not primarily make loans, but instead safeguard assets for rich individuals and companies like mutual funds. As written, the measure would have assisted just two U.S. banks, State Street and Bank of New York Mellon. This offended Gerspach. We obviously don't think that is fair, so we would like to see that altered, he told reporters. Republicans and Democrats who pushed S-2155 through the Senate Banking Committee must have heard Citi's call. So, you know, what I basically see here is, and they're singling out Senator Chris Coons. So he says there are many different interests in financial services that are looking at this and saying, oh my God, there's finally going to be reform to Dodd-Frank that may move. Let me throw in this issue and this issue. There are a dozen different players who decided this is the last bus out of town. And Coons is a co-sponsor of the bill. A hopeful nation and the president himself expected that the Senate would begin debate on major gun policy reform next week, but instead a confounding scenario had emerged. In the typically gridlocked Congress, with the Trump legislative agenda mostly stalled, members of both parties will come together to roll back financial rules during the 10th anniversary of the biggest banking crisis in nearly a century, and it's happening with virtually no media attention whatsoever. So Carlos, I'll just put this in the chat. I don't know if you want to come on tonight, but because we're not going to stay on this, but you know, maybe, how about this? Okay, I'll give my commentary on it, and then we'll see where it goes. Look, Dodd-Frank, for those of you that think that it prevents Wall Street fraud, I don't really agree with you. Okay, and you know, I'm speaking to progressives or conservatives, or to libertarians, or to, you know, anarchists, whatever. The reality of the reality is this, okay? What really caused the Wall Street financial crisis was a lot of this pressure that was made on banks to offer subprime mortgages, in my opinion, okay? And in the opinion of many people. And that drove the subprime bubble, the housing bubble. It was driven pretty much by these Keynesians. Keynesians are followers of John Maynard Keynes, who believe that, you know, strong government investment in certain businesses and markets, you know, through subsidies or through private-public partnerships or through state-run companies, that could drive the economy. That could drive markets up. It could drive, and basically they believe in bubbles. That's their whole perspective. Okay, and you know, you got. I know that I'm kind of not going through the entire bill, but it's obvious that the Intercept does believe that Dodd-Frank was a good move. I don't think Dodd-Frank really did much to protect consumers, because ultimately, you know, what happened was that TARP and other bailouts. I think not included in TARP was AIG. That was a massive bailout. I don't remember how much that was. It must have been something like $50 billion. But these massive bailouts of corporations are going to be done whether you have Dodd-Frank or not. Okay, what Dodd-Frank, I believe, governs more is the lending practices of these large banks. Okay, I mean let's look at a summary. Dodd-Frank bill summary. So it made changes to the American financial regulatory environment and that affected all federal financial regulatory agencies and almost every part of the nation's financial services industry. So, there was the Orderly Liquidation Authority. So that was established by it. That was in response to Lehman Brothers and other banks falling apart. But realize that we still have many of the institutions that were responsible for the worldwide financial meltdown still up to the same shenanigans. You have Freddie Mae or Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, the two large mortgage lenders, and Ginnie Mac. By the way, those of you that don't know, there's three different massive mortgage loaning companies. What are they defined as? I'm showing a little bit of my ignorance and novice and novice knowledge of this, but it's a public government sponsored enterprise. Freddie Mac, for example, is in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, and what they basically do is they buy mortgages from a lot of these banks, and then in many cases they will sell these mortgages. And one of the reasons that this became so toxic, the whole subprime mortgage thing, was that not only were these banks buying them, but banks overseas were buying these credits. They were buying these subprime mortgages, and they were thinking, this will be great. Eventually, we will get all these people that will pay back into our system a lot of cash from the from the U.S. So the Royal Bank of Scotland is the one that I'm most familiar with, and there's, by the way, a fantastic documentary on it, which I'll put in the chat. Let me just find it on YouTube. So yeah, it's inside the bank that ran out of money. So this was from 2011. Those of you that, a little trip down memory lane. So what they basically did was they bought a ton of these mortgages because the Royal Bank of Scotland, just like a lot of these financial institutions, their main concern was growth and reaching more customers and getting more depositors and investors and in this case to manage more debt. They bought the rights to all of these mortgages, but at the same time they had also they bought other banks prior to the financial crisis, including NatWest. So it went from being, the Royal Bank of Scotland went from being basically a community bank around the Scottish countryside and everything, to being one of the largest mortgage holders in the world. And they weren't prepared for that. I think HSBC was another bank that, an even larger bank that wasn't prepared for that. And once those loans turned toxic, because of Keynesians, people that said, well, we should just make it easier for people to get loans. We should force the banks to give loans to people that can't afford it, because it should be encouraged that the common person own a house. It should be made basically social gospel that a full American would own a house. Basically, that's what drove the mortgage crisis. Those that say that, for banks to do it, that they would, that was the problem. That it was the greed of the bankers. Well, what about Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and Ginnie Mae? These three financial institutions that are basically owned by the federal government. That's the truth. Okay, so Freddie Mac is owned by, it's owned literally by the Federal Housing Agency. Okay, so you can't blame the mortgage banks for this necessarily. Okay, it's kind of a two-way screw up. The government was encouraging these banks to offer more of these loans because they wanted this. They wanted more people to buy homes. They wanted this housing bubble to happen. It was a Paul Krugman production, basically. Krugman, who, by the way, I've ridiculed on many occasions, both in writing and on this podcast. He literally encouraged the housing bubble. Let's see if I can find the article where he does. And this is a guy. He's a liberal Democrat. So this is from the Mises Institute. So they're not fans of Krugman, but it says, in 2009, Lou Rockwell, who is a Mises contributor, a very big libertarian, economic libertarian, very similar to my views. He said, so he posted this quote of Paul Krugman's from a 2002 New York Times editorial where he says, to fight this recession, the Fed needs soaring, fuck this, fucking ads. So that's not in the Krugman interview, my cursing, but to fight this recession, the Fed needs soaring household spending to offset moribund business investment. So Alan Greenspan needs to create a housing bubble to replace the NASDAQ bubble. That's Krugman in 2002 calling for a housing bubble. What's more, by explicitly calling for a new bubble to replace the recently burst one, he anticipated by 6 years the Onion's hilarious report that demand for a new investment bubble began months ago when the subprime mortgage bubble burst and left the business world without a suitable source of pretend income, except Krugman was being serious. The quote caught on in the blogosphere to such an extent that Krugman actually responded in his New York Times blog. It said, guys, read it again. It wasn't a piece of policy advocacy. It was just economic analysis. What I said was the only way the Fed could get traction would be if it could inflate a housing bubble, and that's just what happened. So with a deft little two-step, Krugman painted himself as a doctor who gave an excellent diagnosis and not a disastrous prescription. One of his ditto heads posted on his blog that saying Krugman advocated or caused the housing bubble was like saying Nostradamus caused the rise of European fascism. Even economist Arnold Kling bent over backwards to interpret the column in a benign light. It said he was not cheerfully advocating a housing bubble, but instead he was saying glumly that the only way that he could see to get out of the recession would be such a bubble to occur. So Mark Thornton on Mises.org followed up with a devastating collection of 2001 Krugman quotes, clearly documenting his support for inducing a housing bubble. The most damning of this batch is the following from a 2001 interview with Lou Dobbs. He said, meanwhile, economic policy should encourage other spending to offset the temporary slump in business investment. Low interest rates, which promote spending on housing and other durable goods, are the main answer. How can anyone spin that as a purely academic musing and not a policy recommendation for artificially inducing housing spending? Ignoring the other quotes for a moment and just judging from the 2002 column, did Krugman support pumping up a housing bubble or not? Given that, even in his blog post defending himself, he explicitly stated his belief that the only way the Fed could get traction would be if it could inflate a housing bubble. There are only two possibilities. One, he did not support inducing a housing bubble. He wanted the Fed to not fight the recession. And two, he did support inducing a housing bubble. So, look, I know I might be going kind of wait, hold on. Floyd and Pink says the link is blocked for him. Thanks for the link. Sounds interesting. Yeah, you should check it out. Sorry about that. Look, so maybe it's wrong for me to blame everything on Paul Krugman, but I'd like to make this pitch to you, okay? For those of you that don't, they're not convinced that repealing Dodd-Frank is a good idea, okay? Look, Dodd-Frank did not stop a lot of the housing shenanigans that have gone down in the past few years. The government did, in fact, buy back a lot of the houses that so hold on. So Carlos does have a comment, but I'll get to that in a second. Look, the whole problem is this. Okay, when you make it easier for people who do not have good credit scores, who do not have a history of making payments to get mortgage loans, or that they have income that is not sufficient to sustain a mortgage, then you are asking for a lot of trouble, and that's what the subprime mortgage was. Now, I understand from a number of sources, and I'm not an expert, that repealing Glass-Steagall might have been a factor in causing much of that housing bubble. But when you're talking about the Fed, which is largely, it has a strong relationship with the federal government and the Treasury, even though it technically is a private bank. When you have them lowering interest rates on loans, and they've been doing it for a very long time. Yes, I would say, to respond to Carlos's comment, that it didn't cause the bubble. I think it did cause a lot of the bubble. There were people that I knew who bought houses during the bubble who said, well, interest rates are really low, and we could get a really good deal now, and we should buy this house. And they took it on the chin because of that. Because ultimately, when the housing bubble burst, because a lot of these homes were overvalued and people had tried to flip those houses and there were no buyers for them, or people could not pay back their loans, and people could not sustain their mortgage because for whatever reason they couldn't keep their job or whatever, but they couldn't be, it's a very big problem that had a number of causes, of course, but Dodd-Frank did not solve it. And I don't believe Glass-Steagall necessarily solved it. When I look at a regulation, when I look at banks coming and getting regulations imposed on them, you have to look at their long-term reaction. You see, when you look at banking and other industries that are heavily regulated, you have to look at them kind of in the lens of NASCAR. Okay, you can put more rules on NASCAR or Formula One or whatever competition you're talking about, and limit this or limit, for example, if you've seen the movie, I believe it was Senna, where they were talking about a little about the automatic traction software that they were installing, a lot of the new technology that was supposed to make it safer. So when some of these changes come about, people think that it's forever going to change the sport, make the competition harder. In some cases they make a rule change to make it easier. Ultimately, you have to look at it from this perspective. There are always going to be a number of very big blue chip banks, too big to fail. Unfortunately, that principle hasn't gone out the window. Lehman Brothers, for example, should not have been, I think that, they were bailed out. They should not have been bailed out. Carlos says it caused people to buy homes, but it did not cause the bubble. It was shenanigans of interbank dealings with mortgages. Well, yeah, but I did mention that earlier. Maybe you dropped out for a second. But yes, the Royal Bank of Scotland, for example, and other U.S. investment banks that bought, Royal Bank of Scotland was over on the other side of the channel of the ocean. So I'm using them because they're most familiar with what they did. But Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, they bought big into the housing bubble because, they were high on that adrenaline. But the engine for keeping that going was Fed policy. It was FHA policy. It was this desire on the part of Keynesians in the government, people that listen to voices like Krugman, to say, well, we got to get this going. We got to get this engine started. What are we going to do? We're going to lower interest rates. We're going to make it easier for people to buy homes, even if they can't sustain it. And you can blame the banks, and the banks too deserve a lot of blame, because nobody forces you to offer these loans. They still have the discretion, in my opinion, to not invest in these loans. Some of these secondary mortgage buyers, the people who did buy the subprime mortgage loans, they still have a brain. At that point, you know, when the secondary mortgage comes along, they have the option to say, no, we're not going to buy that, you know, that package of subprime loans. But the very existence of subprime loans, the very principle of it, that you could issue mortgages to people that fundamentally were incapable of paying them back. I'm sorry, but that is the result of federal housing policy under George Bush and under President Clinton that was pushing these banks to issue subprime loans. So it's a bipartisan issue. And in my opinion, what would have been the solution to this? The solution is to have the United States federal government exit the housing market. It's to end HUD. It's to end, HUD, by the way, was how come there was no housing bubble prior to 1965? So far as, I mean, there were other bubbles, don't get me wrong, but you know, why is it that there was no housing bubble prior to that? Well, the HUD was created in the Great Society under President Johnson. It was a big government intervention into the housing market, you know, in order to provide homes for low income individuals. That included both government owned public housing and the issuance of mortgages for, you know, Freddie Mac, I think was created, it says here, in 1970. That was under President Nixon. You know, let me see, Ginnie Mae, let me see here. Oh crap, I think my mouse died again. This might get repetitive. Sorry, Carlos. Can't keep up with you. Oh no. I think it's actually dying. You know, this mouse I've only had for about 2 or 3 months. I might actually have to pop out the battery here. Sorry, this is, I know this is riveting YouTube over here, watching a guy take a pair of scissors and, you know, try to get a battery out of a fucking mouse. But, you know, what am I supposed to do? Can't have YouTube without. There you go. Here we go. Here we go. You thought I used it as an excuse, right, Carlos? You thought I'd run away from the issue. But, you know, it's just not true. It's Ginnie Mae, I think. I think I really am having a malfunction in the mouses. Well, I can still use, here, I have a touch screen, so. Fannie Mae was formed in 1938, so that was during the that was during the Great this Depression, and then subsequently FDR and the New Deal. So you know, these institutions, they're all about the government issuing loans and often buying secondary loans. So no, it is an issue of the federal government getting involved. So let me see what some of his comments. It says the bank used this market to cause the bubble. Low interest rates does cause a market, but the bundling of loans are the actual creator of the bubble. Otherwise, we just see a market that increases prices to keep supply in check. They were not pushing the banks. The banks just did it because they have their own interest in making money. Well, okay, so let's look at the problem there. The government decided, okay, as public policy and you know, encouraged by people like Krugman, that they would make it a priority to you know, issue loans to low-income individuals. That's what a subprime mortgage is. Okay, those of you that have no doubt. Okay, we'll look up subprime mortgage definition. So this is from Investopedia. Subprime mortgage is a type of mortgage that's normally issued by a lending institution to borrowers with low credit ratings. So the very fact that those were, normalized by the Federal Reserve, by lending authorities, by the FHA, because FHA does govern a lot of the laws on mortgages. The very fact that that was permitted is that does encourage banks to get into it. It's the same as predatory lending. Okay, those of you that are progressives, you're probably against predatory lending. I'm not a fan of predatory lending, but what's the alternative to predatory lending? It means that people who, for example, somebody with a gambling addiction, let's leave everything out besides that. If they need a loan, who do they go to? They go to an underworld loan shark. And those exist, okay? The gray market, it's called. So, with the housing market, it's not as shadowy. However, when you do have something like these mortgages, let me see here. So it says here, for those who remember, the 2008 market crash and housing crisis was due in large part to widespread defaulting on subprime mortgages. Essentially, many borrowers were given what has come to be called ninja loans. Again, every time I have Carlos somehow involved, I find these articles that have some grammar mistakes. So maybe it's just him. It's like some sort of jinx that he has on the internet. But that was kind of a bad sentence there. Which are mortgages given to people with no income, no job, and no assets. So that's what ninja is: no income, no job, no assets. Oftentimes these mortgages were issued with no down payment. So that was normalized during the housing bubble. Then these borrowers found themselves underwater in a declining housing market with their home values lower than the mortgage they owned. Okay, so imagine this: you get a house valued at $75,000, but once you get this mortgage for and the principal is $75,000, so forget, you still have the interest, which is still, it's low at the time. Then you want to put the house back on the market because you have no income, no job, and what was the last thing? No assets. And you find out that in reality, nobody's going to pay $75,000 for the house, which is, that would be just to get you near. You're not. I mean, you bought the house. You don't want to get $75,000 for a house that you committed to buying for $75,000 plus interest. So you find out that it's really worth something like $46,000. It's. I'm sorry if I'm laughing. It is sad, but that is the reason that the subprime bubble burst, because in reality, it was all a nod and a wink. People were like, oh, we can issue these mortgages, and Carlos is right. These banks were like, yeah, we can get these fucking mortgages in. We can get these people. They're gonna be paying these mortgages for a fucking long time. Because what they would do is they would bundle the mortgages and sell it to other banks. But you don't understand. You're a regulator, Carlos. If you created this product, or let's look at a subprime mortgage as a product that is toxic, because the people that it's geared towards, low interest or what are they called, low credit score borrowers. That that they can't pay it back. Okay, so to begin with, they should not be issued at all. You should not be selling houses to these people. These people should be renting, or these people should be, buying something at a much lower value. It's the same as when you tell somebody, they might have a job that they pay, they earn $1,700 a month. Then you kind of wonder why are they driving around in a brand new Dodge Charger. It's going to be a very long time until they can pay that off. And everybody's taking on loans or some sort of financial commitment that they later find out that they can't really pay back. It's a problem. I'm not going to say we should blame the people that took the mortgage out, all of them, but I'm saying that the very fact that the government permitted these loans to be on the market, that's really the problem here. I don't understand why the light's blinking and it's fucking dead. So see Carlos here. Low interest rates does cause a market, but otherwise we just see a market that increases prices to keep supply in check. They were not pushing the banks. The banks just did it because they have their own interest in making money. No, that's not true. So sorry if this might be. So I have an article by Forbes that says the government did it, but I know we're going to be fond of Forbes. So I have Business Insider. It says, New York Times, it says Bush drive for home ownership fueled the housing bubble. So still, this is the president. The government did cause the financial crisis by encouraging people to take out housing mortgages. Okay. There's plenty of evidence that the tuition bubble, or what do you call it, the student loan bubble, some people are saying is going to be even worse because the value of what was bought, the degree is in some cases worse than a house because you can't sell a degree. You understand that you can't flip. You can flip a house, right? Think about it. You can flip a mortgage. You can flip a house. How do you flip a degree in vaginal philosophy? How can you do it? I'd like to see you do it. I don't know. I'm not just talking to Carlos, by the way. Carlos, if you're still watching, I'm not trying to bully you. I'm just saying that there's an issue when you sell a product that's difficult to get the return on it. Okay, so you've sold debt to the customer, and you need to get that debt back, and that's the bank. And that's also the government. That could be Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, or sorry, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And then there's I keep trying to find it. There's, I think it's GNMA. Ginnie Mae, yes. Also formed in 1968. It's a wholly owned government corporation within the Department of the Housing and Urban Development. Ginnie Mae's mission is to expand affordable housing finance in America by linking domestic and global capitalization to the nation's housing finance markets, providing market liquidity to federally sponsored mortgage lending programs. So providing market liquidity literally means injecting cash into it. So, I'm sorry for everybody else who tuned in for the Farrakhan shit that came earlier. Those of you that tuned in for the fucking Robert Mueller and the second special counsel, I don't know if we're going to get to that today. And there's also President of Brazil has been, his conviction was upheld by the Supreme Court. But I think Carlos has me on a roll right now because there's this misconception among people on the progressive side of the aisle that the banks are all to blame for this. Yes, the banks are to blame if you give them a partner in the government that keeps giving them free money. Of course, what are you going to say if I pay you money to do something retarded? You're going to do it, and that's what the government has been doing for years. Chris Jones is here, by the way. We also have Tom Hamilton, or T. Hamilton. I think he was on the Rethinking the Dollar podcast yesterday, which is also amazing. Floyd in Pink over from New Zealand is here too. So those people are all in the chat. Let me see here. Carlos says you can have defaults, and that's certainly a bad thing. And I would say that is a problem. But the bubble was created by trading credits with inflated values, knowing that they are risky. Then boom. Well, okay. So there's responsibility at every level. There's responsibility at the level of the borrower, because if you know that you can't pay for something, you shouldn't be buying that product. And if that product is a mortgage, if that product is a Ferrari, if that product is buying a kilo of heroin or something, whatever it may be, and you don't have the means to support it yet, it's basic. Okay, I'm not an expert on finance, but I think all of us can agree on that. Chris asked, $75,000 earlier. I think he said it was Floyd asked $75,000 for a house. Incredible. Well, no, that you can get it for much less, much less. In my city, you can get houses for $5,000. Okay, now because of the financial crisis, you see, because the market crashed and nobody would issue loans, and lenders were basically gun shy for 5 or 6 years about issuing mortgages, and they kept interest rates down. So that they didn't want to sell mortgages because they weren't going to make any money on them. They weren't going to make money because the interest rates were low, and they weren't going to make money because a lot of people didn't have, they didn't have the income sufficient to get a mortgage, because the subprime thing was thrown in the garbage, in part because of Dodd-Frank. I'm really simplifying it, because Dodd-Frank is a fucking monster of a bill. It's huge. I'm not saying monster in terms of being bad. I'm just saying in terms of being just a long bill. Chris Jones said real estate agents made bank off in 2007 to 2008. I asked a real estate agent, 2008 must have been a bad year for you. She told me 2008 was one of the best years ever. Well, yeah, if you were liquidating houses, if you were selling houses to one of these what are they called, asset managers or something, yeah, you probably did make a lot of money. I think that there's a lot of cases where, there was the movie The Big Short. There's always ways to make money off of a financial crisis, which is it's an issue that it's not something that progressives are fond of. That's why, by the way, there was an Occupy Wall Street movement, because there were people who were able to exploit this crisis, which affected everyday people's lives, and make a ton of money off of it, and they didn't get any penalty for it. In fact, in some cases, there were people who got bonuses for it. So another comment from Carlos. Well, with that, and then we'll get to T. Hamilton. Well, with that logic, I can argue that the very fact that a gun is easy to get is what causes the tragedy, not the shooter himself, right? Well, think about it this way. You're comparing a gun to a home mortgage, right? But we're acknowledging that a person who, first of all, we're talking also about the value. We're talking about the affordability of it. Buying a gun, if you can't afford it, yes, it's also a bad idea. If you can't afford what you're trying to buy, then it doesn't matter what the fuck it is. It could be a gun. It could be, I'm for legalization of marijuana, but I don't think people who are poor and need a job and need to really, what they really need is motivation and good good habits in life. I don't think it's a good idea for them to buy marijuana with the money that they do have. So yeah, I think you can compare a subprime mortgage with a gun if you're talking about value. Okay, now if you're trying to say, oh, because you can commit a crime with a gun, well, it's not a very smart criminal to begin with that buys a gun legally and then uses it for a crime, because first of all, the serial numbers are probably it's very easy to trace a legal gun. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. There are very few crimes that are committed that are not murdering a spouse or something that very few professional criminals use legal guns. Hamilton says you can flip it by tacking it onto the national debt. I believe average Joe and Jane American don't care about interest payments on the national debt. They care about Netflix. Well, what Hamilton is talking about, and Thanks for tuning in, by the way. A new viewer is the whole illusion of how international finance and the Fed works, which is that people don't feel it in their pockets on a day-to-day basis how our national debt is affecting the affordability of things like housing, the affordability of cars. We're talking about the tariffs right now, and with this debt, like he said, there's interest payments on the national debt. So we do have to pay interest back to China. We do have to pay interest back, and I don't think it's only China. There's other international creditors that have a large portion of our national debt. So there's you can flip it. He's talking also about the student loans. So yes, you can basically you can sell those as basically the same way that you would sell a subprime mortgage, and it's in many cases I would say it's worse than a subprime mortgage, a student loan debt. If you think about a dentist, I hate to pick on dentists, but they go through, what is it, 7 years of school, 8 years of school, and they have to pay often, I think, what is it, like $70,000 a year to pay for dentist school, and then they have to start private practice, and they have to get certifications and insurances and all of that. It's going to take a very long time for that individual to pay back his loan for undergrad and then dental school, and that's where you get a huge issue with the student loan crisis. It's one of the reasons I think that, oh shit, I think I did it now. Oh, here we go. I think somebody's trying to message me. If it's the person I'm thinking it is, then it's going to be a little bit of an issue to accommodate their request. It is indeed, Mr. Yeah, I'll keep that off the air. I see your message there. I'll keep that off the air, but that's okay, buddy. I'm talking to somebody off the air, but anyway, look, we have, so Hamilton said, yeah, he watched my Venezuela interviews. By the way, Carlos is one of the people from the Venezuela interviews. So I hopefully, we'll talk about that next week. I want you to tune in. We were talking about Monday. We'll see what happens. Chris Jones says they gave loans because they said it was discrimination for people of color not to have houses, so they lowered the standards. Well, that was one of the reasons. They didn't say just people of color. They said also poor people in general. The investors got screwed. Floyd and Pink said, does lowering the standard ever end well? Well, evidently not in banking. Mad Dodge Productions is here. Thanks, man. Thanks for tuning in. Just make the whole nation able to grow. 3 plants per household. Why can't we grow our own weed? Whatever. Okay, so Hamilton says, hey, Carlos, thanks for the interviews, my man. Great insight into Venezuela. Anyway, look, so I do want to dedicate at least a little bit of time for the topics that we were going to talk about originally. And again, sorry for my mouse just died like a fucking, bird that hit the power lines. But, I'll try to show the screen. I have to use the touch screen now. It's, you're just going to see my finger all over the place, like I'm the proctologist or something. Says top Brazil appeals court denies Lula the bid to stay out of prison. Brazil's top appeals court on Tuesday denied a request by former Brazilian president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva that he not be sent to prison on a corruption conviction before he has exhausted his appeals. The decision by the Superior Court of Justice makes it more likely that Lula, whose conviction on corruption charges was upheld in January by a lower appeals court, could be forced to begin serving out his 12-year sentence in a matter of weeks, even as he appeals to higher courts. Lula, Brazil's first working-class president, oversaw years of robust growth and falling inequality during a commodity boom last decade, and has said he wants to run again for the presidency in October. he leads all early polls. However, he is likely to be blocked from running by a law that bars the candidacy of any politician with a criminal conviction upheld on appeal. Lula faces 6 other corruption-related trials. Even if he is found guilty in one of the other trials, it is unlikely there would be any appeals decision in those cases before the October election. So basically, you talk about President Lula. What this leaves out is one of the problems behind his presidency. So Lula was one of the more brilliant leftist leaders of the past decades, because he was able to kind of stave off any problems caused by his presidency until after he was out of power. All of the real collapse in Venezuela happened under his successor, Dilma Rousseff, I think her name is, who was just recently impeached. And, her successor is, I think, threatened with impeachment too, although they're having an election this year. And basically what that scandal involved was that Brazil has a massive government-owned conglomerate that controls its oil industry called Petrobras. And Petrobras, there was a lot of shenanigans involving contracting and an international construction firm. I think they're called Odebrecht. That I think they're active. They're active, I think, in Peru, if I'm not mistaken. And there were officials that, through Lula and through other high-ranking Brazilian officials, they were basically using Petrobras as kind of a cash register for kickbacks. So basically, you have these companies, including Odebrecht, I believe. Let me see if I can get this. So. So it is actually Brazilian, and it was founded in 1944. It has a German name, but there's plenty of German Brazilians. It says on June 19th, 2015, Brazilian authorities arrested the former CEO Marcelo Odebrecht in connection with their ongoing probe into bribes paid by the Brazilian oil giant Petrobras. On March 7th, 2016, he was sentenced to 19 years and 4 months in jail for paying over $30 million in bribes to executives of Petrobras in exchange for contracts and influence. So essentially, you have socialist left-wing politicians who get into power, and they have an industry that is basically under government control. I think part of Petrobras is publicly traded, but I'm not sure. Yeah, they are traded. For example, I think they have subsidiaries on the New York Stock Exchange. Excuse me, on Bovespa, which Bovespa is their Bovespa is the stock exchange in Brazil. I think it's in Sao Paulo. Yeah, the Bolsa de Valores do Estado de Sao Paulo. So that's their, I'm getting used to this touch screen, but it still sucks. So Petrobras, they were basically used by some of these high-ranking officials, including Lula and including, what's her name, Rousseff, to, get money through these contracts. They were basically one of the big accusations against him is that there was a house purchased in the name of somebody else, a straw buyer, that basically him and his wife used. And a lot of Lula's supporters say, well, you can't link him on any documents to the house. Well, I'm sorry, but that's the definition of a straw buyer. That's one of the funny things that I find with progressivism. Okay, and I'm not including all of you. Some of you are honest people, and some of you are you do want to make the Floyd and Pink says birds chill out on the power lines, Bold. Well, not on the high voltage power lines, bro. The ones that are, you know, up there and they have the bat wings. They don't really chill out there. I don't think you'll see them. So anyway, a lot of these progressives, they want to fight for the little guy. But what you don't understand is that when people get into power and they see this immense amount of capital flowing from this gigantic industry, you know, Petrobras was a government industry way before Silva or sorry, Lula and Rousseff came to power. You know, it was used by, you know, less progressive governments as a way to garner revenue for the government. So, you know, it's possible for these to be managed competently. That was the case with PDVSA in Venezuela for many, many years, although part of it was owned privately. You know, people could invest in it, people could sell, but ultimately, you know, the governance of the industry is up to the federal government in the case of Brazil and Petrobras. So when these people, they found out that there's this immense amount of capital flowing in and out of Petrobras, and you know there's contracts to be done, there's capital improvements to be made. Basically, they said, you know, we can get something out of this, and then that's when their progressive values erode. And it happens too, you know, on the right with conservatives. You know, you have these televangelists, you have people that go and you know, the George Bush also. He didn't reduce the size of the federal government. He expanded it with the Department of Homeland Security. Why? Because there were people, you know, who were in the security industry. And I think Carlos once told me about Blackwater in terms of going and selling contracts to basically mercenaries to help with your war in a foreign country. So that's when conservatism turns corrupt. That's when conservatism turns into crony capitalism. And I think that you have this confluence. You know, if you're talking about the Amazon River, there's different rivers that meet and you know, they go into the Amazon River and then it becomes one flow, right? Well, when it comes to government corruption, you know, it doesn't matter what letter you have next to your name, whether it's Democrat or Republican, or in this case, it was the Petistas, the Partido do Trabalho, Labor Party in Brazil. You know, they get into power. They love the money. I love money too. And you in the audience, Chris and Floyd and Carlos and Hamilton, I guarantee you also love money. And it's fine to love money, but to take a state enterprise, which is supposed to be for the public good, and to use it to sell favors and to sell contracts and to enrich yourself, that's the flaw of the political system when you have a lot of state intervention. And that's why I always say I don't want more and more involvement between the public and private sector. I think that the public sector should be kept at a minimum, and I think that in some cases they should break up. You know, that they should. You know, Bernie Sanders talks about breaking up the big banks. Well, why just talk about banks? How about other companies? You know, why should Petrobras have been a monopoly in Brazil? You know, look at all the abuse that was created by that. You should probably break up a lot of these state-owned monopolies, break up a lot of private monopolies. You know, they're talking about Google and Amazon and you know, what if we had you know, the entire airline industry had remained under federal control when you know, international commercial air travel had started in the 50s. Can you imagine how awful it would be? Can you imagine how much waste there would be? And it's intensely regulated. So bandsaw is back. Chris says, I love bettering myself. Money is a means to the end. Well, you know, good luck with that. Not a lot of people, there's a lot of people who don't succeed with that. There's a lot of people, you know, people are criticizing, again, I'm trying to use the mouse, but it doesn't work, Billy Graham for, you know, dying, and he passed away, he had like $25 million of wealth. Well, you know, maybe he used a lot of his wealth to help people. You know, it's hard to judge somebody after his death. But, you know, it's a good question. Why did he, you know, supposedly spend his entire life helping people, but he died with, you know, $25 million in the bank? I would hope some of that money went to, you know, some of these underprivileged people that he talked a lot about helping. And maybe he was a big charity giver in his life, but everybody likes to ask the question, if you're such a good person, what do you do with all your wealth? That's what people ask of the Oscars, people, the celebrities in Hollywood and everything. It's a big, it's a topic. Some people, like I would say Donald Trump, gives some stuff to charity, but his big thing is about saying, I'm really rich and I really enjoy being rich. That's his whole thing. Well, I mean, does anybody not appreciate the honesty in that? Does anybody not appreciate the fact that this person does, he's not here to pretend that he's some sort of a golden child. Larry Gerke says, yo, bold like a leopard. Yo, yourself, I saw you earlier on Lionel. Welcome back. Thanks for joining again. So that's all I have to say about Brazil. I kind of went off on a tangent about it as well. But, bottom line, the president of Brazil his conviction was upheld today, and justifiably. Those that think, oh, he's an innocent man, he had nothing to do with it. The financial crisis caused by things like Nunes meltdown. Is he talking about the Nuremberg meltdown? Because I think you're talking about two different things. Nunes meltdown. I'll look that up. But look, sorry, I get distracted by the chat at times. But and now I have to face away. A public-private partnership. This investment in a massive oil company that's owned by the state. You see the results of it. You see this, contractors coming in. Somebody mentioned Halliburton earlier. I think it might have been Chris. It doesn't matter, but you guys know. Hamilton said it's all a charade. In my younger years, I saw Halliburton on every shipping container in Iraq and Afghanistan under both Democrats and Republicans. Doesn't matter. Money and government contracts do. Yeah, absolutely. And there was under Donald Trump, there was this kingfish thing with Puerto Rico. It's all fucking bullshit. It's all bullshit. I prefer not to criticize Trump because he just amuses me so much, and I find his entertainment value very high, and some of his policies I support. But he has some of the same vices as Obama, Clinton, and Bush did, and we're going to have to. That we're going to think about the best way to, as the lowest rung of society, the individual. We're going to have to think of ways that we come together on issues where we agree. Like me and Tariq earlier were talking about. If you look at the beginning of the podcast, there's plenty of areas where we can't agree, but there's a couple of areas where we can agree. And if we can all agree that we shouldn't have public-private partnerships where, the government's basically taking your money, giving it to a private individual to make something second-rate and shitty and sell it back to you, that's a bargain that doesn't bode well for anybody. So that's about it for that. Last thing. Trey Gowdy and Bob Goodlatte, who are two committee chairs in the U.S. House of Representatives. So on Tuesday, they demanded the appointment of a special counsel to investigate conflicts of interest in decisions made and not made by current and former Justice Department officials in 2016 and 2017, noting that the public interest requires the action. Gowdy, Republicans of South Carolina, and Goodlatte, Republican of Virginia, penned a letter Tuesday to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Matters have arisen both recently and otherwise which necessitate the appointment of a special counsel. We do not make this observation and the tenant request lightly, Gowdy and Goodlatte wrote. In an exclusive interview with Fox News, Gowdy and Goodlatte spoke about the discovery of new information as their reasoning behind calling for a second independent counsel. What changed for me was the knowledge that there are 24 witnesses that Michael Horowitz, the DOJ Inspector General, would not have access to. Gowdy said, when I counted up 24 witnesses that he would not be able to access were he to investigate it, yeah, only one conclusion, that's special counsel. So, that seems a little unclear until you get to the next part. That list of witnesses included former FBI Director James Comey, Gowdy confirmed. Last week, Sessions announced that Horowitz would investigate allegations of government surveillance abuse in light of memos released on Capitol Hill by the House Intelligence Committee, which suggested, at least on the Republican side, that the dossier compiled by ex-UK intelligence officer Christopher Steele was used to obtain a FISA warrant to surveil former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. Absolutely, this whole FISA warrant was on Carter Page, Gowdy told Fox News. Goodlatte agreed, stating that the case on which the warrant was built was highly suspect. The lawmakers wrote, there is evidence of bias trending towards animus among those charged with investigating serious cases. They added, there is evidence political opposition research was used in court filings. There is evidence this political opposition research was neither vetted before it was used nor fully revealed to the relevant tribunal. Both lawmakers said they didn't know when or if a special counsel would be appointed at all. Gowdy says, this fact pattern is unique and compelling, and I think he really ought to consider it. Asked why a special counsel was needed, Gowdy told Fox News earlier, Congress doesn't have the tools to investigate this. We leak like the Gossip Girls. What the fuck? Gowdy and Goodlatte wrote that because the decisions of both former and current Department of Justice and FBI officials are at issue, they did not believe the DOJ was, quote, capable of investigating the fact patterns in a fashion likely to garner public confidence. Both Gowdy and Goodlatte have announced in recent months they would not seek re-election this year. President Trump blasted Sessions' decision to use Horowitz, saying he appointed an Obama guy to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse. Horowitz also is investigating former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and whether he wanted to avoid taking action on new Clinton emails found on disgraced Democratic New York Representative Anthony Weiner's laptop, reports said. According to records, McCabe knew about the emails belonging to Hillary Clinton in September 2016, but did not choose to brief former FBI Director James Comey until October 26, 2016, prompting the reopening of the Clinton email investigation just 1 week before the presidential election. It says, while we have confidence in the Inspector General for the Department of Justice, the DOJ IG Inspector General does not have the authority to investigate other governmental entities or former employees of the department, the Bureau, or other agencies, Gowdy and Goodlatte wrote. Gowdy also serves as chairman of the House Oversight Committee. So, let's skip ahead. House Intel ranking member Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, recently released the Democrats' response memo, said the call for a second counsel was a way for Republicans to investigate everything but what is most important, Russia's interference in our election. House Oversight Ranking Member Elijah Cummings, Democrat of Maryland, also called the letter an attempt by Republicans to, quote, protect Trump. Cummings added that the department's Inspector General is fully capable of conducting an independent review. Here in Congress, our attention should be on investigating how Russia attacked our electoral process, not trying to protect President Trump. Goodlatte and Gowdy's letter came just days after more than a dozen other House Republicans penned a similar note requesting the appointment of an independent counsel to investigate the same issues. The 13 lawmakers signed on to the letter that stated, evidence has come to light that raises serious concerns about decisions and activities by leadership at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding how and why the Clinton probe ended and how and why the Trump-Russia probe began. So, let me do a little, let me see here. Trump isn't a part of the good crowd like the Bushes. We'll see how he handles the Fed. That's a litmus test. Trump is owned like all other politicians. To think that he isn't is just foolish. That's bandsaw bandit. Yeah, it could be. I don't think he's owned like all the other politicians, but he definitely has his own interest in mind. So, let's not look at him as the good guy in every situation. But I think in this situation, he is. Chris Jones says, doesn't matter if Trump fails or is like the others, the impact of his presence shook the foundation of the entire world. I could care less what he does with. I think that's not the attitude I would take, Chris. Hamilton says, you're probably right. I just keep thinking about how he said he's a fan of Andrew Jackson. We all know what he did to the central bank. Yeah, I think he broke up the Second National Bank of the United States is what he's referring to. But he also, deported all these Indians to Oklahoma. So there's that. Bandsaw Bandit says a man in Seattle had his gun confiscated by police after breaking no laws. The police took his gun without a warrant and without pressing any charges. Tyranny has officially taken hold on American soil. Well, I hope the guy sues the government. Hamilton says it has. We'll be seeing a lot more Ruby Ridge Waco incidents here, and conservatives will be labeled nut jobs with the dog media and liberal tarts. Bandsaw, did you really mean Nunberg or did you mean Nunes? Because yeah, the Nunberg meltdown, yeah. So the Sam Nunberg thing, I think we'll talk about a little bit, but let me first get to what I just read from Fox News. And you know, the Fox News story is going to be story across the rest of the media as well. So don't think that I'm using Fox News as the only source, because it's, you know, it's only a matter of time. Tomorrow they're all going to be talking about it. Why a second special counsel? Well, there's some clear details that are coming out now as to why Mike Neesmith and the First National Band. I don't even know who they are. Look, the special counsel, second special counsel, yes, it should be convened in order to investigate both Robert Mueller and the FBI. The reason why I would say they're bringing it up now, and it's an interesting rationale, is that they're saying, look, sure, we could have the Inspector General give his report, but his authority is now being limited because notice that the Inspector General only has authority within the FBI or Department of Justice. I think he's the FBI Inspector General. So people who are past employees of the FBI, what repercussions can they get? You know, they're not employees anymore, so you can't have them fined, you can't have them fired. You know, who do you bring your findings to? You bring them to the FBI. So you're saying basically that you want you know, an internal review body of the FBI to conduct an investigation of ex-FBI employees that it can't bring any sanctions against, such as Andrew McCabe, for example. So then they take this report that they have and they refer, let's say Andrew McCabe gets written up. It says, oh, you committed, you know, you lied under oath. We recommend that he be investigated for perjury. Well, you give that note to who? You have to give it to the FBI, because they're the federal investigative authority. It's a broken loop. It's a short circuit here. So, you know, it's and you know, I don't think we have to be lawyers here to understand that there is kind of a problem. There is kind of a problem. Who do you go to? And I've been talking about it for a while. And I don't know, some of you guys are from Australia and New Zealand. Floyd is from New Zealand. I finally remembered that. Look at it this way. Larry's comments are really, you know, they're really relevant at the time. But yeah, I did listen a little to the Monkees. So thanks for bringing up Mike Neesmith. Look at it this way. If you have an authority in your government that they are the national law enforcement agency, whatever it is, I don't know what it is in Australia or New Zealand or in Canada. If so, I know I have some listeners in Canada. And basically, the people who would investigate wrongdoing within those agencies are people within those agencies. Then you could conceivably have a problem where you're asking the police to investigate the police. Now, I know some of you might be saying, oh, come on. There's internal affairs in every police department. Police do go to prison for certain things, sure. But we're talking about the very top of the agencies. There's people, ASIO in Australia, thank you. They were law enforcement. I thought that ASIO was their intelligence agency, but you know, I could be wrong. So law enforcement. You know, there's the question: who polices the police? You know, a lot of us love those movies where, you know, the you know, or TV shows like NCIS, where you have LL Cool J just bursting in with guns drawn, and you know, they take down the perps, and they might even be members of the military or the deep state or whatever, and it's so cool. Does that really work that way in real life? Would anybody do that for you know, James Comey or Robert Mueller? I have my doubts. First of all, those people, they have the capability of hiring good counsel. Publicly, it does not look very well You know, if you have the federal government attacking and you know, busting down the door of James Comey, even though everybody hates him, you know, the image becomes that there's a purge. The image becomes that this is some sort of you know, imposition of a regime of Trump loyalists, and that becomes the problem of appearances, of perception. So no, you would not probably have the FBI bust in on Robert Mueller, or you know, more likely James Comey, for several reasons. Among them, what I just said, the image of the issue of perception. The other issue is that a lot of these people probably do not want to prosecute their former boss, because then they start to think, well, how easy does it become for us to be prosecuted, us as you know, rank and file members or senior middle management, whatever level it is of the FBI. It becomes an institutional issue. They become fearful of their own agency being used against them. And that's the issue I see of why a special counsel would probably be a good idea if you really think about it. If you really think about it, you know, and we're not going to get to Kobe Bryant and the Oscars, but you know, maybe we'll save that tomorrow. But you know, when there's problems within law enforcement and you know, the justice system, it's not like it was designed to police itself. Bandsaw Bandit says, to be a good cop, you have to be a good criminal. It's a fine line. Interesting story along that line. The SEC. You in Australia probably don't know who the SEC is, and you in America. I'm not talking about the college football conference. I'm talking about the Security and Exchange Commission. Was formed by who? I'll give let's say a minute for people to guess. Who was the SEC formed by? Who was the first head of the SEC? Floyd and Pink says we have a dozen cops with cult peacemakers driving high quality, or HQ Holdens. Yeah, so he's talking about handguns driving. I think Holdens are those small sedans over in Australia. By the way, how are those? I've never, you know, they don't sell them here, so I don't know whether those are good or bad. We have a winner, but before that, Bandsaw Bandit says CNN flies to Bangkok to interview a hooker who claims to know Trump's dirty secrets. Is that a true story, or are you making it up? So we have a winner. Larry Gerke says Joseph P. Kennedy. So you were right the first time. Joe Kennedy is Joseph Patrick Kennedy. And Hamilton also says it was started in 1934. Yeah, Joseph Kennedy, one of the worst inside traders of all time, one of the worst criminals in you know, if you're going to call it a crime, insider trading in the history of Wall Street. Yeah, he was appointed the first head of the Security and Exchange Commission after he you know, it was formed in response to the crash of 1929. Larry's cracking me up here, but Joseph P. Kennedy and the First National Band. Joseph Patrick Kennedy, the father of John F. Kennedy. And Larry Gerke said, you know, he uses the quote. I think I do remember that quote being in the story. It takes a crook to catch a crook. That's why he appointed Joe Kennedy, who he wasn't exactly a fan of, head of the SEC. Hamilton says, I live about 20 minutes away from the Kennedy compound in Hyannis. Last summer, the cops got called there and ended up locking two of them up for being jerk-offs. I think I heard about them. And if you have more information about that, I really want to have you on one day. You know, I don't know if you do YouTube. I know that I've you know, I think you found this channel from another YouTube channel, Rethinking the Dollar. But, you know, I really would like to talk about that one day. But in the interest of time, I think we will end today. You know, Kobe Bryant and the Oscars, we'll do a different day. Joseph Fitzpatrick Kennedy, the F is not for his name, bro. And oh. Bandsaw Bandit says, just out of curiosity, what do you guys think of Joe Rogan? You know, he's so huge, but I don't really listen to his podcast. But the what I've seen many times is that you know, he does have some really deep conversations with guys like Peterson and who people brought up earlier during the segment with Tariq. He has Peterson on. He also has people I don't like on, but it's his show. He's had Abby Martin on. He's had Jimmy Dore, who I like, but I disagree with heavily. So a great podcast. Sam Harris he's had on, but he's all about free thinking and independent thought. So anyway, please like this video if you haven't already. Share this channel. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm pretty sure all of you are subscribed. Encourage your friends to subscribe to the channel. There's not a lot of you that listen to this, but I think a lot of you guys know that that there's kind of a war of ideas going on, and the war of ideas depends on those who are pro or against censorship. So this is all about permitting people to get their ideas out there and really fight about it and fight about those ideas. There was me and Carlos. We don't agree on many things in terms of the financial system, but we do agree on the need to get that conversation circulating. And we have people, thank God, Hamilton came in today, has some knowledge of it. I'm aware from some of his channels. We have Gurky here. I think he describes himself as a cold warrior, not as a Maoist, as was previously erroneously described by somebody. There's a lot of people that they can bring a reserve of knowledge, and of course Carlos, and that's why why do I want why do I want more viewers? It's not only because I do want more viewers, period, because it's good for me, even though I don't make money off of this. It's also because I want to hear more from more different people. And the more people come onto these chats, the more people that add their perspectives, the greater of a variety of views you'll get. And the more we counteract the censorship. Counteracting the censorship is best if we have people from different directions coming to, coming and attacking it. Because if they can portray it as a left-wing problem or a right-wing problem, then it's easier for the censorship people to, just isolate us. Gurky says, if you want more viewers, Cher says, clean up the man cave somewhat. Well, maybe I'll just move to a different room and then you won't even know. More opinions means more knowledge. Absolutely. So, ditch the Rabbitohs shirt. This is a Mexico soccer shirt, dude. Anyway, that's enough. I've ended the podcast, and thanks, you guys. And until later. Tomorrow morning, by the way, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we're going to talk to Ronald Machemwa from Zimbabwe. Okay, so I'm really signing off with that. Tomorrow night, about 8 p.m., we're going to talk to Fred, who is Lebanese Canadian, really into, I guess, Zionism and Israel or something. So it's going to be a strange conversation over there. I guarantee you it's going to be strange. But just tune in tomorrow, and that's it. So spread the word.